The first thing I noticed when I pulled into my aunt's driveway was that someone had parked a lifted F-250 sideways across two spots, blocking the path to the garage. No apology note. Just a truck that said I own this space and everyone else can deal with it. I should have taken that as a sign. My name is Ren. I'm 31 years old. I worked, as far as my family knew, as a logistics coordinator for a federal contractor out of Arlington. That's what it says on my business cards. That's what I told my mother when she asked. That's the version of me that showed up to my cousin Beau's engagement party that Saturday in October, wearing a green wrap dress and carrying a bottle of Caymus Cabernet because I'd learned years ago that showing up with a nice bottle of wine made people forget to ask too many questions. My grandmother, everyone called her Gran, had called me 3 times that week to make sure I was coming. You need to be here, Ren. Family is family. Her voice had that particular quality she reserved for things that were non-negotiable, somewhere between a request and a verdict. So I came. The party was at my aunt and uncle's house in Fairfax. One of those big colonials with a wraparound porch and the kind of lawn that requires professional maintenance twice a week. My Aunt Deb had strung Edison lights across the backyard. There were caterers in black aprons. Someone had rented a bourbon tasting station, which, in retrospect, explains a lot about how the evening went. I parked half a block down and walked in through the side gate, the way I always did at family events. Less fanfare that way. Less of the, "Oh, you're here," energy that I never quite knew how to absorb. Gran found me within 2 minutes. She always did. She was 74, barely 5'2", and moved through a room like a woman who had decided decades ago that obstacles were simply things that hadn't yet gotten out of her way. "You look thin," she said, taking my face in both hands. "I look exactly the same as always, Gran. You look thin and tired." She kissed my cheek. "Come get some food before Beau's friends eat everything worth having." I followed her to the food table and let her pile a plate for me, and for a few minutes it was fine. It was actually nice. The October air had that crisp edge to it. The yard smelled like wood smoke from the chimney in the corner, and Gran was telling me about her neighbor's dog who had learned to open the fence latch and kept wandering into her garden to sleep in the hydrangeas. I was laughing. A real laugh, not the polished, social one I'd been using all evening. Then I heard him. "Ren. Hey, Ren." My cousin Dylan's voice carried across a yard the way a car alarm carries across a parking garage. All volume, no warmth. He was 26, recently out of the army after 2 years, 1 deployment, a base in Germany. A lot of PT and a lot of pride about both. And he had the particular energy of a man who has been the most impressive person in several rooms and has built his entire personality around the expectation that this will always be the case. He was walking toward me with a red Solo cup in one hand and 2 of his army buddies flanking him like punctuation marks. "There she is," he said, "the mystery woman." "Hey, Dylan, we were just talking about you, actually." He grinned. "I was telling Trace and Weston here that my cousin works for the government. Super classified, very important." He put the last 2 words in audible air quotes, pushing papers somewhere in Arlington. Trace and Weston laughed. Not mean, exactly. Just the easy laugh of men who are comfortable in a current that someone else is steering. "Something like that," I said. "She's too modest," Dylan said, leaning toward his friends like he was sharing a joke. "Ren here has always been the serious one. You know, the one who follows all the rules, never takes risks, plays it safe." He looked back at me. "What do you actually do all day, Ren? Like, what does a federal logistics coordinator even manage supply chains for sensitive operations?" I said. "But you know how it is." "The interesting parts I can't talk about." I smiled. Kept it light. He smiled back, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something had shifted in him slightly, a micro-adjustment in posture, the way a man recalibrates when a conversation hasn't gone the direction he expected. I turned back to Gran. She was watching me with an expression I recognized. Patient, careful, and not entirely without amusement. I managed another 40 minutes of comfortable distance. I talked with my Aunt Linda about her pottery classes. I talked with Beau's fiancé, a warm, sharp-eyed woman named Cecily, about her work in environmental law. I refilled my wine glass once. I was, by all reasonable measures, having a perfectly acceptable time. Then I heard a kid cry out. Not a tantrum cry, not the theatrical wail of a child who has been told no. a sharp, involuntary sound. The kind of sound that punches through ambient noise because the body makes it before the mind can decide whether to. My body was moving before I consciously registered the decision. In the far corner of the yard, near the woodpile, Dylan had my second cousin Theo by the back of the collar. Theo was 12, small for his age, quiet in the way some kids are quiet when they've learned that being noticeable brings unwanted attention. He was being half lifted, half dragged, his sneakers scrabbling for purchase on the grass, face gone red and panicked. "Walk it off," Dylan was saying. "Stop being so dramatic. It's called toughening up, kid." Theo made the sound again, a choked, involuntary gasp. "Hey!" My voice came out flat and even. "Let him go." Dylan turned. His grip on Theo's collar didn't loosen. "This is between me and my little cousin. Stay out of it, Ren." I looked at Theo. His eyes were wet and wide and fixed on me with the focused desperation of someone who has run out of other options. I said let him go. Dylan released Theo, not because I'd asked, I understood, but because releasing him was its own kind of statement, a performance of I was done anyway. Theo stumbled sideways, caught himself on the woodpile, and stood there trying to slow his breathing. I kept my eyes on Dylan. "He was being soft," Dylan said. "I was doing him a favor. You had a 12-year-old by the collar. He exhaled a short, contemptuous laugh. "Roughhousey, lighten up. This is a party." "Roughhousey?" I repeated. "Yeah." He took a slow sip of his drink. Comfortable again, already back on terrain he recognized. He glanced at Trace and Weston, who had appeared at the edge of this little scene. Audience secured, and the Weston, who had appeared at the edge of this little scene. Audience secured. "You know what your problem is, Ren? You've spent so much time behind a desk that you've forgotten what it's like out in the real world. Some kids need a push. Some people," another glance at his friends, "need to learn that the world isn't going to hold their hand." You wouldn't know anything about toughness?" I set my wine glass down on the top of the woodpile. Very carefully. Very deliberately. "Dion," my voice was quiet, "I'm going to ask you one more time to walk away from this and enjoy the rest of the evening." He laughed. It was the specific laugh of a man who has decided he's already won. He stepped toward me. Casual, unhurried, shoulders loose. "I've got 6 inches and 60 pounds on you, and we both know it." That was the message. He didn't need to say it. His body said it for him. "Or what?" he said. "What are you going to do, Ren? File a report?" He reached out and pushed my shoulder. Not a punch, not even a hard shove, just a contemptuous little push. The kind designed to make you stumble and feel small. The kind that says I can touch you, and there is nothing you can do about it. 3 seconds. That's approximately how long what happened next took. I caught his wrist on the backswing, stepped inside his reach, and used his own forward momentum to redirect him. One controlled rotation. One specific point of pressure at the elbow joint. He went down the way big men always go down when they've never been trained to fall. Fast, surprised, and hard. And then he was on his back in the grass, looking up at the Edison lights, and I had his arm at an angle that communicated, without ambiguity, that attempting to get up quickly would be a decision he would regret. I held it for exactly 2 seconds. Then I let go, stepped back, and straightened my dress. The yard had gone quiet. Not the gradual quiet of a conversation dying down. The sudden, total quiet of 30 people who have all simultaneously stopped talking to look at the same thing. Dylan lay in the grass for a moment, breathing, winded. Not unconscious, not seriously hurt. I'd been careful about that, but very much on the ground and very much aware that every person at this party had just watched it happen. He sat up slowly. "What the?" he started. "You pushed me first," I said. Calm. Even. Not unkind. "There are 12 cameras at this property. Check the footage if you like confirmation." This was true. My uncle had installed a full security system 2 years ago after a neighbor's car got broken into. I'd noticed them when I walked in. Dylan stared at me. I turned to Theo, who was still standing at the woodpile, staring at me with an expression somewhere between awe and shock. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Small, fast. Good." I picked up my wine glass. "Go find your mom." My Aunt Deb reached me first. What happened? She said. Her voice was low and tight, the voice of a woman doing rapid damage control at her own party. Ren, what on earth? Dion had Theo by the collar, I said. I asked him to stop. He didn't. He made physical contact with me first. I responded. You threw him to the ground. I controlled the situation. He's family. Theo is also family. She stopped. Her mouth opened and then closed. From somewhere behind me, I heard Dylan's voice rising, explaining something to Trace and Weston in a tone that was still trying to be casual and not quite managing it. She got lucky. I wasn't expecting. She just grabbed my... I did not turn around. My Uncle Ray materialized at Deb's shoulder. He was a good man, my Uncle Ray, the kind who coached Little League until the kids were too old for it and still showed up to their high school games. He looked at me the way he always did, like he was trying to solve an equation that kept coming out differently than he expected. Dylan says you attacked him, he said. Dylan pushed me after I asked him twice to stop grabbing Theo. Ray looked at Deb. Deb looked at Ray. Ray said carefully, I think it might be best if you apologized. No. He blinked. I'm not going to apologize to someone who put his hands on a 12-year-old and then put his hands on me, I said. If it would help, I'm happy to call the non-emergency police line and file a report. We can do this any way you'd like. Silence. That's not necessary, Ray said. Okay, I nodded. Then I think we're at a point where I should say goodnight to Gran and head out. From the edge of the yard, Dylan's voice. She's insane. She's always been insane. I've been saying it for years. I didn't respond to that. I went to find Gran. She was sitting in one of the Adirondack chairs near the chimney, watching the party with the careful attention of a woman who had seen a great many things unfold over 74 years and had developed strong opinions about most of them. She had a glass of sweet tea in one hand. She had, I understood immediately, seen everything. I sat down in the chair beside her. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Your grandmother on your father's side, she said finally, was a woman named Ruth. Ruth Elaine Caldwell before she married. She taught herself 3 languages from library books because her family couldn't afford to send her to school past the 8th grade. She paused. She never made noise about it, just was what she was. I looked at the fire. You're going to get a lot of grief for tonight, Gran said. I know. Your Aunt Deb is going to call your mother. I know that too. Dion is going to tell a version of this where he comes out looking considerably better. He'll try. Gran nodded very slowly. And none of that matters as much as the fact that Theo is standing in the kitchen right now eating a plate of macaroni and cheese and looking considerably less like a cornered animal than he did 15 minutes ago. I turned to look at her. Her eyes were bright and steady, the way they always were when she'd made up her mind about something. I need to ask you something, Ren. Okay? That what you did? She made a small, precise gesture with her hand. That was not something you learned in the logistics office. The fire crackled. Someone across the yard laughed. The night had resumed itself carefully, like an animal returning to a watering hole after a disturbance. No, I said, it wasn't. She studied me for a long moment. Are you safe? She asked. Not what do you do or who are you really? Just that. Are you safe? I felt something loosen in my chest, quiet and sudden, the way a knot releases when the tension finally goes the right direction. Yes, Gran, I said. I'm safe. She nodded once, satisfied. Good. She reached over and patted my hand. Then eat something before you go. The shrimp is very good and your aunt over-ordered on purpose because she always does. My mother called at 7:45 the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. Then I made coffee, stood at my kitchen window in Alexandria, looking out at the gray October river and listened to the message. Ren. Deb called me. She said you attacked Dylan at the party last night. She said you attacked Dylan at the party last night. She said you threw him. I don't even know where to start. He's your cousin. He could have been hurt. You need to call me back and explain yourself, and then you need to call Dylan and apologize. I deleted it. Then I called Theo's mother, my cousin Felicia. Wait, Felicia was on the list? I called my cousin Margot. No. I went through the name in my mind again. Careful. Her name was June. June was Theo's mother, soft-spoken and perpetually overwhelmed, who had been standing at the bourbon tasting station for most of the party and had not, as far as I could tell, witnessed what happened with her son. She answered on the second ring. "Ren," she said. There was a quality to her voice I couldn't immediately place. "I wanted to check on Theo." A pause. "He's fine," she said. "He's actually, can I tell you something?" Her voice shifted. Lower. "He asked me this morning if you could teach him what you did." I smiled, just slightly, into my coffee cup. "I think he also told his father," June said, "and his father told my brother-in-law. And somewhere in the telephone chain, apparently someone looked up your name in a DoD database and..." She stopped. "Ren, why does a DoD database return basically nothing under your name?" "Because I'm very good at my job, June." A long pause. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay. I'm not going to ask. That's probably wise. Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Deb is, I know. She's really upset." "I know that too. Dion is going around telling people you sucker punched him." "There are cameras," I said. "He knows there are cameras. He'll stop saying that eventually." June went quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, something careful in it. "Thank you," she said. "For Theo, I should have been watching. I should have, you didn't know," I said. "You didn't know," I said. "You do now. That's what matters." After I hung up, I stood at the window for a while longer. The river was doing what rivers do, moving and different, purposeful in its own way. And I thought about Dylan on the grass, looking up at the Edison lights, working through the specific humiliation of a man who picked the wrong target. And I thought about Theo in the kitchen with his plate of macaroni and cheese, and I thought about Gran's hand on mine, warm and certain. "Are you safe?" Yes. 3 weeks later, I was back in a briefing room in an unremarkable building in an unremarkable part of Arlington, and my supervisor, a woman named Colonel Ashby, who communicated primarily in precise declarative sentences and had not, in my 6 years of knowing her, wasted a single word, slid a tablet across the table to me. On the screen was a security camera still. My aunt's backyard, Dylan going down. Me stepping back, straightening my dress. "This made the rounds," she said. I looked at it. "Family event," I said. "So I gathered." She retrieved the tablet. "Asset protection?" "Minor," I said. 12-year-old family member?" Situation was escalating. She studied me for a moment with the particular expression she used when she was deciding whether something required a formal conversation or could simply be noted and filed. "No injuries reported," she said. "No. No police response. No." She nodded, once. "Then we won't make a thing of it." She moved on to the next item in the briefing. That was the entirety of the professional consequences. My mother called 4 more times that month. I answered on the 5th call the week before Thanksgiving. Sitting in my car in the parking garage of a building I'm not going to name in a city I'm not going to specify, still in the clothes I'd been wearing for 14 hours. "I don't understand you," she said. It was her opening statement, not a question. "I never have." "I know, Mom." Dion was humiliated. Dion put his hands on a child and then put his hands on me. Both of those things happened first. He says, "There's camera footage, Mom. If you want to see it, I can send you a link." Silence. "Is that what you've become?" she said finally. "Someone who just goes through the world like that? Like nothing can touch you?" I thought about that for a moment. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer was that plenty of things touched me, that I spent a not insignificant amount of my professional life being touched by things most people never had to think about, and that what she was reading as coldness was in fact the scar tissue of someone who had learned, over many years and in many places, to keep functioning when touched. What I said was, "Someone put their hands on a 12-year-old and I stopped it. That's the whole story." Another silence. "Dion could have reported you," she said, "to the police. He could have. He did it. Because of the cameras." "Because of the cameras," I agreed. She didn't say anything for a while. I listened to her breathing and to the parking garage settling around me and to somewhere in the background of her kitchen the sound of the evening news. "Gran called me," she said finally. "Quieter. Different." I waited. She said, "My mother stopped. Started again. She said that you're doing important work." that I should be proud. A pause. She wouldn't tell me what she meant. Gran is a wise woman. She also told me that Theo has apparently been asking his parents to sign him up for a self-defense class. Something warm moved through my chest. Good, I said. Ren, Mom. I said it gently as I knew how. I'm not going to apologize to Dylan. I'm not going to pretend the thing that happened didn't happen. But I love you, and I would like to come to Thanksgiving, and I would very much like to sit next to Gran and eat too much pie and hear about her neighbor's dog. I paused. Can we do that? A very long silence. The dog apparently learned to open 2 different fence latches, she said finally. Her voice was still complicated, still not fully resolved, but there was something in it that had shifted. Just slightly. Gran told me, I said. Smart dog. Very. We talked for 11 more minutes about ordinary things, and when we hung up, I sat in the parking garage for a while, in the dark and the quiet, and I let myself be tired in the way that doesn't show, the way that accumulates quietly, over years, in people who have made their peace with being misread by the people they love most. Then I started the car. I had a 6:30 flight. The world does not pause for family drama. It keeps moving, indifferent and purposeful, like a river. You either move with it or you get left behind. I had learned a long time ago which one I was built for. And Dylan, lying in the grass under those Edison lights, looking up at the October sky with the specific expression of a man whose understanding of the world has just been quietly, permanently revised. I hope that was the beginning of something for him. I genuinely do. Not shame, not embarrassment, something more useful. The understanding that silence is not the same thing as weakness, that the most dangerous person in any room is almost never the loudest one, and that sometimes the woman carrying the nice bottle of Cabernet is the one you should have been paying attention to all along. I've thought about that October evening a lot since it happened, not obsessively. I don't have the bandwidth for obsession. But in the quiet moments, usually early morning when the coffee is still brewing and the city outside my window hasn't fully started yet, I think about Dylan on the grass. I think about Theo at the woodpile. I think about Gran's hand on mine, warm and certain, asking the only question that actually mattered. Here's what I've come to understand. What happened that night wasn't really about a fight. It wasn't about who was stronger or who had better training or who ended up where. It was about cause and effect in its most honest form. Dion made a series of choices: to grab a child, to mock someone he'd already decided was beneath him, to make physical contact when words weren't getting the reaction he wanted, and those choices produced a result he hadn't accounted for. That's all it was. Not punishment from some external force, just the natural, logical consequence of treating the world like it will always bend to your assumptions. I think about the choices I made too. I could have walked away after the first comment. I almost did. There's a version of that evening where I finish my wine, say goodnight to Gran, and drive home before any of it escalates. That version exists. I chose differently not because I wanted a confrontation, but because Theo made that sound, that involuntary, cornered sound, and some part of me that is older and quieter than my ego made the decision before I could talk myself out of it. That's what I'd want anyone watching to understand. The choice that mattered wasn't the 3 seconds on the grass. It was every choice before it. The years of training, not because I knew one day I'd need it at a family party in Fairfax, but because I believed that being capable was worth the cost of becoming capable. The choice to speak up twice before acting. The choice to be precise rather than punishing. The choice, afterward, to put down my wine glass and go check on a 12-year-old instead of standing around waiting for someone to thank me. Strength without judgment is just damage waiting to happen. I've seen that truth play out in enough places and in enough ways that I don't argue with it anymore. Dylan had strength. He had training, discipline, a body built for physical confrontation. What he didn't have, what he was still in the process of building, maybe, was the wisdom to understand when to use it and when to simply stop. That gap between capability and judgment is where most people get themselves into trouble. It's where I almost got myself into trouble, early on, in circumstances very different from a backyard in Virginia. And Theo? I hope Theo remembers that evening not as the night his older cousin got put on the ground, but as the night someone showed him that quiet people are not empty people. that the ones who don't perform their strength are often the ones who have the most of it, that a person can walk into a room carrying something enormous and invisible and choose every single day what they do and don't do with it. Gran already knew all of this. She has known it for 74 years. She just sat by the fire with her sweet tea and waited for the rest of us to catch up. I'm still catching up. I think that's probably the point.